Okay, so here is an overview of what we're going to chat about today. I am going to give a little bit more context and history about my office, UCO, and the policies that we oversee. And I'll talk a little bit about policy definitions, the kinds of behaviors that are considered prohibited conduct under our policies, and get into more depth on that. I'm going to talk about where we get reports from and the responsible employee model that exists at the university. I'll talk about the available resources to students, staff, faculty, applicants, visitors, et cetera, that we engage with, the supportive measures that are available to them. I'll talk about the overlap of our work with student organizations. For those of you who are, executive board members, you may also be wanting to contact us about navigating difficult situations. We're always happy to have conversations like that. And then Q&A is welcome throughout, but I just sort of have a slide at the end where I'm happy to just answer any questions that are coming up. You can feel free to use the Zoom chat, and I will do my best to monitor that while we do both. If you have any technical problems along the way, also just let us know, and Alexis and I will figure it out. So an overview of our office, the University Compliance Office. Many of you may know that we were formerly known as the Equal Opportunity and Compliance Office. We're still the same entity on this campus. We're still addressing the same kinds of behaviors. We sort of expanded, rebranded, moved divisions, and took on some more responsibilities this year as we added some other units and types of compliance under our umbrella. The main purpose of what I'm going to be talking about today is how we are the main place on campus to respond to reports of harassment and discrimination if it's based on a protected status, different forms of sexual misconduct, relationship violence, and stalking, and workplace violence if it's being done by university employees. Not to be confused with what our colleagues in student conduct do if those kinds of behaviors are occurring, but maybe being done by a university student. We're a neutral resource. We work with every party that is connected to a concern, whether it is the person who has the question themselves about their concerns, whether it is the person whose name has been shared with us as potentially, engaging in this type of behavior. We are meant to be fair and equitable with all of those parties that are connecting with us. We're also private. The information that comes to UCO is sort of documented separately and away from the rest of the campus. So our records are not the same as your Connect Carolina records or your academic records or your grades or your existence within student conduct and stuff like that. And that's sort of by design that we're a separate private space. Not confidential though. When people are sharing information with us, we're working consistently as a team to try to approach and respond to the things with the same consistency that would come into all other cases. We are headed by our Title IX coordinator, Elizabeth Hall, who is in charge of the three respective teams within UCO. I am on the report and response team, which is the team that is receiving new complaints, new concerns, general questions. We work closely with the investigations team who oversees our formal disciplinary process if behaviors potentially violate the policies. And as many of you may be familiar, our office also includes the accommodations team, and they help with student and employee disability, pregnancy, and religious accommodations. I've got my first Q&A, Alexis. Someone's asking, how do we check in? My understanding is that the CLE prompt is going to happen just at the end of our session today. But if there's anything different about that, Alexis, you just let me know. Okay, so starting us off about some of the policies and behaviors my office is concerned about. The first is our policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct. This is our broad-reaching policy, which I'll define some terms of today of all forms of discrimination and harassment if it's connected to a protected status. This applies to all members of the UNC community, whether they are students, staff, faculty, applicants, visitors, all the different affiliations that can happen. And it has a pretty broad scope of the types of behaviors that fall under it. And it has a pretty broad scope of the types of resources and support we can provide people. Within that umbrella, we also oversee what's known as the policy on prohibited sexual harassment under Title IX. This is a little bit of a more narrowly written policy that specifically addresses some of the requirements issued to any university from the federal government. If a behavior hits a certain checklist, that means it falls under Title IX. All that is to say that there are regulatory things behind the scenes that sort of influence that only certain behaviors technically fall under Title IX if they match a certain list of conditions. And if not meeting those conditions, but we're still concerned about it, we use our broader policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, related misconduct to sort of guide that work while still being compliant with what the federal government requires of this university and of course, all universities that receive federal funding. Finally, an element I'll talk about today is the workplace violence policy, specifically because, yes, I know everyone here is a student. I believe actually everyone here is a student and your behaviors wouldn't necessarily fall under this yourselves, but our workplace violence policy does specifically address if we have hazing concerns if employees are engaging in the hazing. Whether that's advisors or some other, employees that might be connected to a student organization in some way. So I'll talk a little bit about that too, just to, review those policy definitions. So starting with the policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct, with everyone's permission, I'd like to call PPD-HRM from here on out. This is the form of prohibited conduct. It prohibits discrimination and harassment based on these different 13 protected statuses, whether it's age, color, disability, gender expression, gender identity, genetic information, national origin, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or veteran status. We are informed by different parts of the Civil Rights Act, of the educational amendments, et cetera, to sort of establish what these identity groups are, because they are similarly protected from discrimination and harassment on a federal level in different, like Title IV of the Civil Rights Act, Title VI, Title VII, if you're familiar with any of the legal topics that kind of inform this kind of stuff. This is where these categories come from and just otherwise best practices. When we're talking about sex discrimination, it also breaks down further into forms like sexual harassment, sexual assaults and sexual violence, sexual exploitation, and even different forms of pregnancy discrimination. Hence why our office is the place to provide accommodations for students that might be pregnant or parenting. In the RM of PPD-HRM, this includes relationship violence. So things that aren't necessarily discrimination and harassment, but are still considered prohibited, like relationship violence, stalking, interpersonal violence, as well as retaliating against someone for making a report like this to the university, even if that's not necessarily the behavior itself. I said this before, I wanted to define terms, not because when people come to our office, we quiz them, because that's not the case. You know when something feels targeted and wrong and a little bit more personal than just disagreeing with someone and having a difference of opinion, or someone just generally being, making you uncomfortable, not from that perspective, but because they are just trying to be unfriendly and unkind. We know that when it involves one of these identity groups, sometimes it feels really clear and direct and obvious, and sometimes it feels really circumstantial, and the context is important. It's not important to know that the behavior someone is sharing with us is going to be a policy violation. We still want people to come, reach out, and talk to us about what that concern is. So that's not why I share these definitions, to sort of pre-test any things like that. It's just to sort of say this really guides our work. When we are receiving concerns, we're analyzing it through a policy perspective to see, does this behavior fall under one of these categories? Discrimination specifically is some sort of differential treatment that occurs to someone that is based on the protected status that they have, regardless of what that is. There's not some ages or races or religions or disability statuses that are more protected than others. You have an identity for each of these categories for a vast majority of them. And if that is the rationale and reason that you're receiving different treatment, then that could potentially be a form of discrimination. The different treatment specifically that my office would be interested in prohibiting and addressing and resolving would be things that are affecting your ability to access an aspect of your education or to get involved in some form of employment with the university. So whether that is, a professor not using approved disability accommodations that were created by my office could be a form of disability discrimination. Excluding someone from an event because of a protected status that they hold, or even a perceived protected status that they hold, could be a form of discrimination. Harassment is also a form of discrimination that breaks down into two different types of categories. Similarly, it's behavior, whether it's, in person, commentary, physical, electronic, those different types of behaviors that are similarly based on a person's protected status. That is the reason and motivation and potentially is inseparable from what's going on. And similarly, it's interfering with their ability to participate in different programs and activities at the university. The two forms of harassment that our policy addresses are hostile environment harassment, which is, looking at something through not only the subjective lens, but the objective lens on if the behavior is offensive. Is it severe? Is it pervasive? Is it impacting a person's ability to participate in these sorts of things? A lot of this language comes specifically from like our Title VI of the Civil Rights Act language and the manuals that are put out by the Department of Justice and get updated pretty frequently. But a hostile environment is looking for a pattern. It's looking for an impact to someone's ability to participate. Another form of harassment is this Latin phrase, quid pro quo. And I know we don't have lawyers in the room, but I'm sure many of us have seen the incredible film Legally Blonde and have some legal jargon under our hats. But quid pro quo is a form of harassment that means this for that. So imagine a TA saying, I will give you an A if you go on this date with me, or an on-campus employer saying like, I am going to fire you unless you come out and grab drinks with me after this. Those sorts of exchanges can be a form of quid pro quo harassment. Additional terms that are defined in the PPDHRM, and some of these might feel straightforward to some of us, and some may be relatively new, that I want to talk about is it's just to give us common language about these sorts of things. Sexual assault or sexual violence is defined as having or attempting to have sexual contact with someone without their consent. And I'm going to go a little bit more into consent right after this. Interpersonal violence, also known as relationship violence, is these different forms of actions that is done by an intimate partner, a spouse, a family member that's causing fear or substantial emotional distress. As a campus, a lot of times students are cohabitating with individuals that they don't know particularly well, whether it's through on or off campus housing. And we are sometimes able to have that behavior fall into the same similar umbrella as potential domestic violence. Stalking is a prohibited conduct, which is this repeated unwanted contact and attention, all of these different acts that are causing fear or substantial emotional distress for an individual. Another form of related misconduct is this broader category of sexual exploitation. I don't have a definition here, but I've listed out some examples to sort of paint a picture of this. Sexual exploitation is any sort of, sexual behavior that's sort of, or sex-based behavior, whether it's sexual or based on someone's sex, that sort of goes beyond the normal boundaries of what consent was given for in the first place. So maybe that is threatening to disclose someone's sexual orientation or gender identity by outing them in a space that they haven't agreed to share that information. Maybe it is circulating nude photographs of someone that you've received that didn't give consent for them to be shared with other individuals. Maybe it is sending nude photographs of yourself or those individuals to someone who's not consenting to receive them. Different things that sort of take potentially pre-established consensual sex-related or sexual-related behavior and then extending beyond the boundaries without the consent to be able to extend beyond that. This could look like inducing incapacitation on someone in order to engage in sexual contact, using incapacitation like a drug or an alcohol in type of setting. It could be agreeing to use contraception, but then stealthing, which is like removing a condom during sexual intercourse without the other person knowing, or potentially not being truthful or misrepresenting if you're on birth control or not after saying that you are or are not. Knowingly exposing someone to a sexually transmitted infection. All of these things where there is some sort of potential exploitation, whether it is for sexual gain, personal gain, financial gain, all the different ways that could happen. I've been talking about, without consent, but I wanted to kind of be clear about how this policy also defines consent. This is, on our campus, we have a affirmative stance on consent. It needs to be some sort of communication that is a verbal or a nonverbal yes. It needs to be conscious. It needs to be freely made. It has to be some sort of outward demonstration, even if it's not the word yes, other different forms of body language, or some sort of active action of conveying that consent. It can't be coerced. It can't be taken by force. It can't be because of be received during incapacitation. These are different standards that we're thinking about when we're assessing behaviors that come to us on if they potentially violate this policy. And as a result, this is the kind of information we share at like orientation, for example, with new students to sort of help culture build with our colleagues in like the violence prevention office. I've said this before, but within this related misconduct umbrella, it also includes different things that are not sex or discrimination or harassment based, but are sort of structural to the behavior itself. Maybe that means someone is complicit. They are helping, they're encouraging, they're helping with the logistics of someone else engaging in this behavior. Maybe someone's retaliating against another individual. Our policy sort of sets out that people have the right to do a couple of things that we refer to as protected activity. This means like engaging with our office to make a report. This means potentially being named in a report and having to engage with us to talk about that side of things. This means requesting accommodations from the university. All these things are considered protected activity, and to receive adverse action, such as intimidation, threats, rumor, gossip, other sort of interference for engaging in protected activity could be a form of retaliation. The other major policy I want to talk about through this lens is our workplace violence policy. And, this is behaviors that employees, contractors, other third parties within universities control would engage in that they go beyond unprofessional behavior, goes beyond pettiness and snarkiness, but rather different patterns of bullying, cyberbullying, threats, intimidation, actual violent behavior, property damage, usage and threats with a weapon, brandishing a weapon that sort of goes beyond just that initial like petty concern. Things that would, make a reasonable person have concerns about their physical safety, and if they are in physical danger while they're around this individual. Where, like I said at the beginning, student conduct is the office that sort of houses the policy on students engaging in this type of behavior, but as student organization members, and potentially many of you are executive board members, you might be engaging with employees on a fairly regular basis, especially if they are university employees and also advisors to your organization. And these standards apply in those cases. And hazing similarly is sort of included under this umbrella. It's defined in the new student code of conduct as, of course, prohibited, but different ways where employees might be engaging in things that sort of are coercing without consent to put themselves at risk in the the way that hazing kind of comes together, whether it is like inducing or causing or requiring individuals to perform certain tasks. That is all within the connection to the membership, ranging from the harmless pranks that are sort of lore that we see in media to things that could be outright illegal, risky, and otherwise dangerous. So that's a little bit of the policy intro into what we're looking at as an office. But I want to talk a little bit about where we get information from and what we do with it, just to better inform you all, because you may sometimes want to come to UCO as an individual to share your own concern, as an organization executive board member to say, I want to talk through a situation my club is navigating, and we want to be a resource to that. And we want to be able to have those sorts of conversations with you. So I'm hoping that informing you a little bit about what we do with the information that comes to us helps assuage and just gives you transparency about what that looks like for you to feel more informed. Generally, we receive a mass amount of our information from what's known as responsible employees. And these are employees at the university who are not confidential, who are required to share information with the UCO if it relates to discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, workplace violence, and the other types of areas that we oversee. This is virtually everyone that works at the university, except for the small carved out groups, such as the counselors at Counseling and Psychological Services, the confidential gender violence services coordinators, who are in the Violence Prevention and Advocacy Services office, the University Ombuds office, the medical providers at Campus Health, the medical providers at the UNC Health Emergency Department, like the emergency room at the hospital. Virtually everyone else at the university holds this responsible employee designation and is required to share this kind of information with our office, and for us to not only decide how we're going to respond, but to ensure that there will be a consistent response to these kinds of behaviors if they're ever brought up. Information can come to us via our main online reporting form. You'll notice our website is still eoc.unc.edu. It takes a while to update and rebrand. I'm sure any of you that have gone through an Instagram handle change, you know that it takes a minute before all your friends tag you in the right place. So our website is still the eoc.unc link, and we're working on moving it over to the uco.unc link. We can receive reports by email, whether it's directly to my team, the report and response managers, or to my director, our director of report and response, Cassidy Johnson, or the Title IX coordinator who sort of serves the whole university, Elizabeth Hall. We can receive walk-in information in person at our office at 214 West Cameron Avenue, which is square between Granville Towers and the North Carolina Hillel building. We are the yellow house in the middle that I showed a photo of before, or by phone, whether it's our main office line, contacting my team directly, or again, the Title IX coordinator. People are welcome to, sometimes people come and they don't want to share their name, but they want to start talking about the situation. They want to know a little bit more about resources and options and where information goes before they identify any of the cast of characters in a situation. That's all an option. Our process is voluntary. When people submit that report form or walk through our door or send us an email, they always have the right to how much they want to share, unless they are someone navigating a responsible employee obligation to share all that they have. Here's the link to making an incident report on our website. Not link, sorry. Here's a screenshot just in this upper corner. I just thought it would be helpful to point out. So oftentimes people are asking and concerned about what happens with the information that is sent to you all. I have this concern, but I don't want it to get away from me. And I certainly don't want maybe person X, Y, or Z to be informed that I'm even considering making a report. So here's an easy, simple, straightforward flow chart of what a general situation looks like in our space. In this example, I just wrote out that, let's say a responsible employee, your instructor, or Alexis. Let's say Alexis contacts us to say, hey, I've received this information from this student leader. I think I need to report this because they are articulating that they feel like they're being harassed or experiencing stalking. And I want to make sure that your office is aware of this. We would thank Alexis for following through and let her know, please tell that student that you've made this report and that we are going to reach out to that individual that it's about, like the impacted person. So Alexis would go back to that student leader and say, hello, I wanted to remind you, I am a responsible employee. I shared this information with the UCO and they're going to contact you with resources and an invitation to meet. Internally, we're reviewing the details that we have. Are there other named parties? Is this the second, third, fourth, fifth concern that we have about that individual? Are people articulating that they're in physical danger? Is there an immediate threat of potential harm? Do we have to work with our threat assessment team? Do we have to work with UNCPT to address these immediate safety concerns? If yes, then yeah, we absolutely might take steps. Some of you have probably even seen some of the crime alerts that occur, which is something that campus safety chooses to send out if there's like an ongoing concern that affects everyone in that moment. But otherwise, if those needs are not there, if those questions are all no, it's unlikely and uncommon that our office would take steps to immediately respond to a report before we've had an opportunity to talk to the person who's most impacted by it. That step that happens at that part is we would reach out to that student leader to say, hey, Alexis, maybe let you know that you would be hearing from us. I'm Jahan. I'm on this team. Here's what we do. Do you want to meet? Do you want to talk about some of the resources? Do you want to talk about support that's available? Do you want to talk about reporting options that are available? You can respond to this. You can delete this. You get to decide. The impacted person is the most important cast member in that situation. And we want to make sure that they are deciding for themselves where they want this to go. Maybe people respond right away and say, no, thank you. Maybe they delete the email. Maybe they share save the resource guide that we shared to look at a later time. Or maybe they say, I'd like to meet in 6 months. All of those are available options. Like I said, our voluntary process puts that person not necessarily in the driver's seat, but they're on the bus and they decide when and where they get off that bus. When people say, yes, I would love to meet, what they do is they end up meeting with a report and response manager like myself. We talk about the different confidential resources that are available. Like I said at the beginning, we're private resources. When information is shared with me, I talk to my team, I talk to my leadership, maybe I connect with PD, I might have to connect with colleagues in housing and dean of students. We're really careful about sharing information with people only on a need to know basis, but it certainly can be shared for us to be able to figure out how to coordinate care. Sometimes people instead want to start by only talking to a confidential resource. They don't want the information to go anywhere else. So whether that's engaging in trying to get healthcare, connecting with the gender violence services coordinators who are part of the violence prevention and advocacy services team as a confidential advocate, connecting with something like CAPS or the university ombuds office, which is a confidential generalist space for any difficulty you might be facing at the university. We also are talking to individuals about different supportive measures about that might be available to them, whether that is, maybe they're seeking a campus no contact order with the other person. Maybe they're needing assistance with changing work schedules, or they want to know the other person's, general routes they take on campus to sort of better inform their safety planning about what paths they should take. Maybe they need help requesting extensions or deadlines or university approved absences, or just, supportive measures are meant to meet the need of the individual. So I don't have an exhaustive list here because it's sort of about what are you looking for? Are you looking do you need help changing your housing assignment? Do you need help crafting this email to an instructor? Do you want your instructors to know that we've talked about something non-specific so that they're a little bit more flexible this semester? We really want to figure that out with the individual so that it is tailored to, like I said, individualized is the word that I wrote here, to sort of help build that environment. And I see in the chat something else happened. Yeah, and Alexis is thank you, Alexis, for sharing that link. One of the main resources we direct people to, especially those individuals who maybe don't want to directly connect with us right away, is the safe.unc.edu website, which is just a fantastic hub for a lot of information in one place about supporting yourself, supporting others, roles and responsibilities that are, for people affected by discrimination, harassment, sexual violence, interpersonal violence, and stalking. Whether it's learning more about what the policies look like, what reporting options look like, what trainings are occurring on campus related to this topic, how to talk to a friend, how to talk to a classmate, how to know what your options are. This is a great hub. So even if you forget a vast majority of the work we talk about today, or the content we talk about today, having this resource, sharing it with your organization, sharing it with your peers is a great first place to sort of like get this information out there. Finally, sometimes people are connecting with us because they're looking to know about what their reporting options are. They want to know, I am interested in accountability for the other individual, and I want to know if that is a possibility here or elsewhere. So we'll talk to them about, of course, there are potentially university reporting options through our office, whether it's reported directly to my report and response team, to the Title IX coordinator who we work with closely to navigate these sorts of things. But there's also potentially reporting options off campus. As a university, we have jurisdiction over people who have an affiliation with the university. So if a student has done the behavior, we have a jurisdiction over their student status. If a professor has allegedly done the behavior, then we have a jurisdiction over their employee status. It's not a criminal process. It doesn't result in those sort of criminal or civil type cases, but sometimes people do have the ability to report to police as well. The way police navigate jurisdiction is by the geographic location of the incident. So yes, UNC Police is always a resource for safety planning, for exploring what reporting might look like, but they may be connecting an individual to Chapel Hill PD or Carrboro PD or Durham PD or I'm from New York City, so NYPD, like based on where the incident occurred, to be able to explore those kinds of options. In terms of when people report to us, they want to see accountability on our campus. there is a couple of what we refer to as response options. The first category of response option is people asking us to take no action. They want to document the situation. They want to get some of the resources and supportive measures I just talked about in the last slide, but they're not necessarily looking for a next step. They intentionally don't want a next step to occur, whether it's concerns of retaliation, other competing priorities going on, or just whatever their personal reason is about wanting to either land there or not. This is what I meant before about the impacted party sort of gets to decide a lot of where that information goes. And the reason that we consider this a response option is because we're meeting what people are requesting of us. Another type of response option that people request of us is what's known as our informal resolution. Maybe they want the other person who's connected to the behavior to be spoken to in a way that is educational. They want someone to sit that individual down to let them know that there's concerns about what the behavior was. Maybe people are requesting training for their particular org or for their organization, or their department, and to sort of help improve the culture around these sorts of things. Maybe an informal resolution request is something like I talked about, a campus no contact order, which is not a disciplinary tool, but it's like a directive from the university that lets two individuals know that they're not going to have communication directly with each other. When we receive these kinds of requests, we consider, is this behavior appropriate for informal resolution? There are certainly things that are potentially too severe that you can, reason out under our sexual misconduct umbrella, where an educational conversation is not an appropriate response. But this might be a tool that's available to individuals. It's all fairly individualized. Finally, a reporting option people sometimes are interested in is what's known as our formal resolution process, whether that is meeting with investigators to determine if there is a formal investigation option to say with, finality, did this person violate the university's policy, the ones we discussed earlier? And as a result, what are the appropriate sanctions that would affect their student status, their employee status, et cetera? So no, not criminal outcomes, but potentially someone being put on probation or being suspended or expelled, or if it's an employee being reassigned or terminated. Sorry, that was the word I was thinking of. Fired from the university. Those kinds of like things that affect their status. Within the formal investigation process, sometimes people are looking for there to be educational outcomes still in this accountability focused approach. And that's what's known as our alternative resolution process. Maybe the outcome people are asking for is they want an individual to enroll themselves in a counseling program, or they want them to engage with a specific book or documentary and write about their reflection experience with it. Our office serves as sort of the go-between with parties that are interested in something like that to see if they can agree to what those responses are, as in lieu of doing a full disciplinary formal investigation, but it's still considered to be our like formal resolution process. My office and you all as potential organization leaders, we have an overlap in this space too. And this is a relatively regular question that people come to us and ask about. Specifically they're hearing, I am my organization's president. I'm hearing from my members that someone in our organization has engaged in discrimination or sexual misconduct, and I am concerned about it and I don't know what to do, and people want this individual removed and I want to remove them, and all of those things. So this comes up fairly often, and we really welcome and invite you all to contact us if this is happening so that we can talk through what the process looks like. Generally, the rules are pretty clear on this. Student organizations that are registered with the university are no different than an academic department that is receiving the same federal funding as being a part of the university. Just like how individual departments don't have the ability to hear, respond to, and figure out the resolutions to these types of complaints, they refer to our office to take a lead on these sorts of things. And we do that because of the compliance pieces and the regulatory pieces that we're thinking about that maybe you as an undergraduate or graduate student aren't necessarily connected to or have the same legal perspective on. we would have those organizations still defer to the UCO to take lead on responding to any concern of discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, et cetera. So we would start similarly by connecting with that impacted person to kind of understand what is the nature of their concern, what are they looking for, and some of the response options that I've just been talking about, they can affect a student's status, including their ability to participate in an organization, like the ones that you all are part of and lead. um, Individuals are entitled to a due process, and organizations and individuals that make these choices to potentially remove someone without doing what's known as their due process could potentially incur risk for themselves, as potentially retaliating against an individual based on allegations alone. So we really want organizations to defer to our process to address these sorts of things, so that you're not putting yourself at risk, in entangling yourself in the personal legal process of that individual, in a way that could follow you following the university. And I don't say any of this to try to scare anyone. We really want to be a resource, and Alexis's team can also assist with addressing like how to navigate this. And maybe also there's an element of, not only is this person said to have made someone else uncomfortable in this way, but they're also a board member and they're not doing their responsibilities. Those are the kinds of things that student life and leadership can help with, you being able to figure out where are your rights to address that kind of behavior. I know that you're all watching me in webinar style. You might not be able to click it, but there is an incredible link on the resources for officers webpage that Alexis, I'll flag later for us to send out to the attendees list, that includes information about how to navigate something related to discrimination, harassment, how to contact us to sort of talk through that. Okay. That was all the content that I have. So I will open us up for Q&A. Please feel free to send it in the chat, or the Q&A box, or whatever feels more comfortable to you. And then Alexis, I just have one final slide after this before I give you back the reins to talk about the CLE process.